Another video, Purple Political Talk here. Today is Saturday, August 14th, 2021, and today we're going to be looking at some of the latest 2022 and 2024 polls that have come out over the last week, and we're going to do a weekly update on the polls. And, this week has been a very active week politically. We've seen a lot of big changes when it comes to, Congress, to Biden's approval rating, to a lot of different things. And these things are going to have shocking impacts on the 2022 midterm elections in many different ways. We're going to get into that and a lot more in this video. But before we do begin, I want to remind you guys to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to be up to date with our latest content. And also, in that spirit, I did want to remind you guys that channel memberships are now open. If you would like to become a Purple Political Talk channel member, you could do so by pressing the join link next to the subscribe button or the link down in the description. And I also did want to give a very big shout out to our Purple Political Talk channel members, David and Maxwell and Adam Hurst. We really cannot do this without you. So now that we've gotten all of that out of the way, let's get started with the video. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, and I think it's one of the biggest and quote-unquote shocking developments of this last week, is Biden's approval rating. We saw within a matter of around 2 weeks, Biden's approval rating was at 10%, now all the way down to almost 6%. So this is a pretty big drop, and I think that generally speaking, the Democratic Party should be worried at this point. And from the data we have today, most of this data is not good for the Democratic Party. And one of the big things it tells us is party environment for the Democratic Party is not where they need it. So I think that at many levels, it kind of also shows that there's a lot of enthusiasm behind the GOP. And I think the biggest thing that shows us this is this. Take a look at the areas that are overlapping. This means that it's actually really close. If the areas in the middle are white, it's just there's a very big gap in disapproval or approval. And I think that what this graph is showing us is that Biden has fallen from, his, approval honeymoon, like some like to call it. Now, I think that there's many, different things that go into this. I think, first of all, it's more likely than not going to be based on the economy and other dodgy decisions I think the Biden administration has made in the eyes of the American public. And, a lot of these votes, they're not losing substantially, the same Democratic base that voted them in, but they are losing independents. And that's going to be something that's going to be very dangerous for Democrats moving forward in the 2022 midterms. And I think if you take a look at most of these polls that we do have, some of these polls have Biden up, some of them have narrowly down. And, it's not a good look for Biden, with, losing his approval. And it's certainly not as bad as other presidents in the past. But I think that there's two things we must consider here. That first of all, but before I get into this, polls need to be taken with a grain of salt. Polls have been wrong in the past. Most of the polls that were wrong were, wrong towards the Democrats. They overestimated Democrats. But I think that, some of the big things we've seen in the past, an approval rating of around or over 50% is usually going to be your safe, like where you're pretty much safe and your party should be doing okay. However, considering that Biden won the election by a total of 7 points nationwide, and if you take a look at this, he went from having actually a pretty large, approval rating, of over 10% to now being so close. I think it's something that's not only, it's dangerous for him. And I think that, of course, his approval ratings, I think, will likely not reach as low as Donald Trump, as like the low 40s. However, I do think that if that does end up being the case, the Democrats are royally screwed. But I do think that regardless, if Biden is under 50%, there's going to be trouble moving forward. And I think that these polls back me up. So we have some polls here I did want to talk about. I wanted to start talking about, you just go down the list of polls and the important ones I see. First of all, we have the governor race in Virginia. I think this race actually is a lot closer than a lot of people think. I think a lot of people, including Terry McAuliffe, they thought this race was going to be a walk in the park. They don't need to worry about it. But again, the Republicans are enthusiastic about going out and voting. And, with this poll, again, most polls have this race between 2 and 5%. And I think that is a lot closer than the Democrats should realistically be in Virginia. And I think, again, this goes back to my point saying that the Democrats should be worried. The party environment is not in their favor. the excitement's not there, their support is not there. And I think going into the 2022 midterms and further into the 2024 elections, it's looking like a very tough, elections, moving forward for the Democratic Party. And they're going to have to do either some big reshaping, they're going to have to do some big, big change in platform if they do want to win moving forward. And I think this also tells us one thing. The ideals of the Republican Party are popular right now. Now, I think that one of the big things that really screwed over the the Republican Party back in 2020 was, Donald Trump himself. I think that his rhetoric is something that lost a lot of support. And truly, if you look at beyond, a lot of the theories that have been out there of why Trump lost the election, 10,000 votes in Georgia, or 12,000, and 10,000 in Pennsylvania, or not Pennsylvania, in Arizona, that could have easily been a couple of suburban voters. And I think that Trump's rhetoric was really effective. I think that now that Trump is somewhat out of the picture, and it's really gone back to, old Republican versus, old Democrats, I guess, to the old way of political establishment in some ways, because we still have, very big populist movements on both sides of the aisle. With that, I think that's really helping out the Republican Party. Other polls I did want to take a look at. These I found very interesting. So this YouGov poll, which I would say is one of the more quote-unquote reliable pollsters, they, do a lot of polls. For the Democratic primary in 2024, they have Harris plus 34%. I look at this poll and I say, what the hell? I don't think that, Kamala Harris is going to have that plus 34% support. I think that if all the people on this list run in 2024, I do think that, people like, Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg, and Elizabeth Warren could potentially increase their support. And I think when Kamala Harris starts running that campaign, we're going to see her lose support. However, plus 34%, again, if you were Kamala Harris, you should be really happy. But generally speaking, I think we've seen many polls, we've seen a lot of data that shows Kamala Harris is not a good candidate for the Democrats to run in 2024. If she does end up being the nominee in 2024, you can consider the Democrats to be at a handicap when it comes to winning the race. As far as the Republican primaries goes, with Trump Sr. on the ticket, I think it's going to be pretty easy to see and point out and single out who's going to be the nominee. Trump is very popular with a majority of the GOP, according to this YouGov poll. Now, I think what's more important is who follows him in this poll. Again, with Trump not on the ticket, I think that the support will redistribute, in many different ways. I think DeSantis will take a lot of the bulk support. But I think another thing that I think is important here is DeSantis is building up his base. And I think that, even if Trump runs in 2024 and DeSantis chooses to challenge him, which I don't think he will do, but if he does, he could have enough of a base. And I think that a lot of these voters that are anti-Trump, likely, again, they could redistribute in other ways. A lot of these voters, this adds up to a good 10%. So, a little bit more than 10%. But that gives them, a pretty interesting, amount of support here. And I think that moving forward again, Trump Sr. is a candidate that could end up being a detrimental factor. And I think all of this goes out the window if the Democrats run Kamala Harris and the Republicans run Donald Trump. Now, I did want to talk about this general election poll, Biden plus 10. I think that kind of shows where, Trump currently stands. And I think that was pretty interesting. The other big poll I did want to take a look at was this poll. This was the poll between, Democrats and Republicans in the general ballot, and it only has the Democrats ahead by 2 points. So this poll must be, frightening to many extents for Democrats in congressional campaign committees, because if the general environment is just Democrat plus 2 in an environment that in 2020 the Democrats won by 7%, that must be, spelling a big disaster for them with redistricting. And, they barely won the House in 2020. We can't forget that. A plus 2 environment is going to, spell very bad results for the Democratic Party. I would say, in my eyes, the perfect environment for the Democrats to stay at least where they are now is just a plus 5, plus 6 environment. And that is not the case right now. And I think moving forward, it's something that the Democratic Party should be worried of. So that covers a lot of the polls I think I needed to cover. Very interesting polls. But now I did want to take a look at some forecasts. I think this is important data. And I did want to show you this. right now with this Senate forecast, which is one of the few for Senate forecasts we have out, the margins are a little bit off, but generally speaking, I like to see where they put the races, kind of do they tilt Republican, things like that. What are we seeing with this? The Republicans have built their base, and this Senate map is good for the Democrats, but not as good as it was before. I think that the Democrats are clearly losing ground in places like Wisconsin. They're clearly losing ground in places in North Carolina. And Pennsylvania. This was a place that, they should have been winning by a lot more, the Democratic Party. And the Republicans are gaining support in certain of these areas. And again, this doesn't come as a huge surprise. The Democrats right now are in a pretty poor party environment. They're going to need to do a lot of things, pass big legislation that, is not bipartisan in a way. What they really need to do is pass something big that a lot of people can't, really say no to, and to the point where, they could say, we gave you this. The Republicans had no deal in doing this. So I think that there's many different things the Democrats must do. And I think right now their position in the country is horrendous. This map shows us that, and this governor's map shows us as well. There are so many, governor's races. And I think the governor's races might be a little bit more of an indicator to what the nationwide environment is, because it goes to a state-by-state level. There's a lot of races that have been shifting. I would say Florida is one of the big ones because of the rise of COVID-19 in the state of Florida. But take a look at, Nevada. Take a look at Arizona. Take a look at Georgia. Take a look at the Midwest. I would argue that a lot of these races should be pretty comfortably in the Democratic Party margins if this was a regular election. But at this point, because the Democrats are in control and their party has been losing a lot of support nationwide, that is no longer the case. And I think to many levels, the Democratic Party should be worried. And I think what all of these polls show, and something they have in common, is the Democratic Party is not as popular as they seem right now. Of course, this is all subject to change. But I mean, if I were a Democratic strategist right now, I would seriously be worried. So, guys, tell me what you guys think about these poll numbers and what you guys thought about the video in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a huge thumbs up. Like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to be up to date with our latest content. And again, thank you guys so much for watching, and goodbye.